Okay, welcome to section 4.6. This is technically the last section of chapter 4. Our objective is to understand the slopes of lines. For our homework, we have page 202 to 203, 1 to 15 and 18. Now, at the end of this, you will not have answers to this. This lesson is all about slope. Slope is hopefully something that we understood fairly well from Algebra 1. So if at the end of the lesson we're struggling, trying to do our homework, let me know. Hopefully we're going to be okay with this stuff though. Hopefully this is going to be a review for most of us, but I want to make sure we do review it before we actually start it. Slope is referred to as the steepness of a line. It is found using the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Other ways that we heard of slope is when we heard rise over run. Or some of us heard it as change in y over change in x, or for those of us that are some science buffs, delta y over delta x. Now, we have two theorems that are going to match together. If two non-vertical lines, and what's non-vertical? Up and down. Beautiful. So they're not up and down lines. If two non-vertical lines are parallel, then their slopes are equal. So if we have the slope of 1/2 for one line and the slope for 1/2 of the other line, if they're parallel, their slopes are going to match up. It works the same way here. If those slopes are equal, 1/2 and 1/2, you know the lines are parallel. These two right here are just converses of each other. For our next theorem, if two lines are perpendicular and neither is vertical, then each line's slope is the opposite reciprocal of each other. So if we know we have perpendicularity, and the slope of one is going to be 2 over 1, the slope of the other is going to be the opposite, so negative, the reciprocal, so flip-flop. And those are going to be perpendicular slopes. And it's converse, so again, we got them going together. If a line's slope is the opposite reciprocal of the other line's slope, the two lines are perpendicular. So again, if we have these slopes right here, we can tell they're perpendicular because one is the opposite sign of the other and the reciprocal, the flip-flop. Okay, here we go. For our first example, we're going to determine if triangle ABC is a right triangle. Well, just looking at the picture, I'm going to guess that there might be a right angle formed right here. Now, if we think we have right angles formed here, the only way to truly tell is if there's perpendicularity amongst the lines. Now, this is obviously not drawn to scale. I don't even have any lines here. So remember, just because something looks like there might not be a right angle here or here, there really might be. So here we go. Let's first compare sides AB with sides AC, looking at their slopes. Now, I'm going to let point A be x1, y1. I'm going to let point B be x2, y2. Now, would it make a difference if we mixed them up? Made this one our x2, y2, made this our x1, y1? Absolutely not. As long as they go together as a pair of x1 and y1 and a pair of x2 and y2. Let's plug it into our formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And two negatives are going to make a positive. Let's go ahead and simplify. 3 minus 10 is negative 7. Negative 4 plus 2 is a negative 2. And two negatives again make a positive 7 over 2 slope. Now, AC. A is already x1, y1, which would make C x2 and y2. So here we go. Again, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Two negatives make a positive, which simplifies to end up giving us a negative 5 over 8 for our slope. Definitely not opposite sign reciprocals. Opposite sign, yes. Reciprocals, no. So we got one more side we want to compare. We want to look at side BC and compare it with both AC and AB. Let's see if we have a little bit of perpendicularity going on here. Now, if B is already the x2 and the y2, let's change that C. Let's make C the x1 and the y1. So here we go. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Simplifies to give us negative 2 over negative 10. Two negatives make a positive, and reduce to give us a 1/5 slope. Definitely not going to be perpendicular. Now, although we have opposite signs between two sets, none of them are reciprocals. Fractions flipped over. Therefore, triangle ABC is not a right triangle. We have no perpendicularity. Okay, for our last example, we want to find the slope of the median to AD and the altitude for AC. So here we go. Slope of the median. What does it mean to be a median? A median means that it's going to be starting at a vertex and attaching to the midpoint of the side opposite. Well, what is the midpoint? That's the first question we need to ask. We find the midpoint by taking the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So add up the x's, chop them in half. Add up the y's, chop them in half. And the midpoint that we're going to get is going to end up being at 2.5, 5. So here we go. The slope of the median to AD. Let's let this be x1, y1. Let's let this be x2, y2. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It's going to end up giving us negative 1 over 5.5. Now, we can't have a fraction mixed with a decimal, so we got to come up with some options. The first option is to multiply the top and bottom by 10 and then reduce. Now, 0.5 is like saying a half, so instead a quicker way is to multiply both the top and bottom by 2, which would give us negative 2/11 for our slope for the median to AD. Now, the next one, we want to find the altitude to AC. Now, I'm going to erase some of the stuff I have here in the middle. Now, the altitude to AC means we're going to be forming a right angle with AC. So here's what it would end up looking like. We're going to end up with a perpendicular that's going to actually be formed outside, and that's okay. But if we're going to have a perpendicular formed, we're going to have a right angle formed, which means that we're going to have opposite sign reciprocal slopes. So let's look at the slope for AC. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It's going to end up giving us a negative 3/4 slope. That's the slope for AC. Now, if AC's slope is negative 3/4, and we want to form a right angle with AC, the slope of the altitude to AC is going to have the opposite sign, so instead of negative, it's going to be positive, and it's going to be the reciprocal, 4/3. If you have any questions about this, let's make sure we're asking tomorrow in class before we start our work. Now, I want to remind us that I'm not including the answers to our homework. The homework is talking about slope and incorporating some geometry vocabulary to go with it, such as medians and altitudes. So we have to keep in mind what those words mean as well. Other than that, if we have questions, make sure we bring them to class, make sure we ask them as we're going through our work, and as always, have a good one.